Good morning. Would like to introduce a new budget template for the OSRP office. We hope that it will be a little more user-friendly and will make it easier for faculty and others to build budgets for their proposal. You'll notice that it is significantly different than the earlier version. The attempt here is to capture the way North Carolina Central does business, and then as needed, transfer those costs to a sponsor-specific format. So I'd like to start off by introducing this template and walking you through how to use it. Of course, you're welcome to reach out to OSRP at any time and ask questions. We're happy to help you in any way that we can. So let me start by walking through some of the common aspects of the spreadsheet throughout the file itself. Anything that is a white or a yellow cell is locked. Either it has a formula that can't be changed or there's no changes needed. If it's a green cell, you can enter data. For example, I would put Dr. Sites, project title, test budget, sponsor, NCCU, prime sponsor, NCCU. And it's obviously it's hopefully intuitive. You can put your start date here, and it will change the dates as well. You'll notice that it defaults to a 5-year budget. You don't have to use a 5-year budget. It can be 1 year, 2 years, 5 years. Yeah, it's really up to what you need. We'd like you to put your proposal number here. And now that Cayuse is live, we want you to put the Cayuse number there so that we know what proposal the budget belongs to. We encourage you to upload a copy of this budget that you build as an attachment within Cayuses. Towards the bottom of this spreadsheet, you'll see a couple other colors. Anything that's a smoky color is a drop-down box, and you can choose which indirect rate applies. The default will be the federal definition, modified total direct cost. If you have questions about which one to use, please let us know. You'll also notice that there are pop-up windows that describe what types of costs go in those different categories. Sometimes it'll be a federal definition, sometimes it'll be based on North Carolina Central policy. Further down, you'll identify which period applies to the rate that you're going to be using. Again, the default here will always be federal. So if the majority of your proposal happens after July 1st, we encourage you to use the higher rate. Your project will be charged actual cost, whatever that is. But if the majority of your proposal falls within a different time period, we encourage you to select the appropriate rate. You notice there are a couple different types of categories here. Organized research, again, will be the default. Instruction and other sponsored activities are defined with the federal definition. If you have questions about which one applies, let us know. Also, if it's on campus or off campus, you can choose which one applies to your project. Again, there's a specific definition that we follow. If you have questions, let us know. Let's say that your project has a customized rate. Maybe it's Department of Education, for example, and they don't pay the full federal rate. You can use the custom rate field here. You would select yes and put in the particular rate. Again, if there's a situation where your sponsor does not recognize our rate agreement, please provide the information that supports that decision. These costs represent what it actually costs the university to support all the research activities. And so it's important that we capture those exceptions when applicable. Now we know that it's not uncommon for there to be a rate increase on salaries. So if you anticipate that you're going to get a raise, or the folks working on your project are going to get a raise because the state of North Carolina legislature traditionally does that, you can check yes or no here and choose the particular rate. The default here is 3%. Again, your project will be charged whatever it is. If you get a raise and we didn't put it in the budget, you'll have to cover that out of another cost category, which could be problematic over 5 years. You can charge the first year and all years, or years 2 through 5, but not year 1. You can be creative in how you think the best represents how your project is going to be impacted by changes in salary. If you have a target that you're trying to meet, maybe the sponsor said they only have $500,000. Put another zero there. You can use that to help see where you are as you build your budget. Lastly, this orange field is cost share. So as we build this budget, you'll see opportunities to identify particular costs as cost sharing. To remind you that when we identify something as cost share, it has to meet a particular definition and will have a different specific obligations for postal board. So we may ask you lots of questions during the proposal process. That's how we start using this budget template. Everything else that we build will use the information that we've entered into this particular sponsored summary sheet to govern a lot of the calculations. So we're going to go to the next tab. This is personnel. Personnel represents traditionally 70% of the cost of a budget. So we recognize it usually has the most scrutiny. So we put key personnel in here, or just we start with faculty, if you will. We say John is going to be here, and maybe he has a co-PI, Dr. Brown. I'm going to identify whether they're key personnel or not. Key personnel or not. You can see that there are some pop-ups here that identify what those categories are. You would just identify yes or no. We also want to identify what period of time we anticipate the expense to occur. You can choose from any one of these 4 categories. Last one being cost share. If you choose cost share, it will show up on a different tab and will not be charged to the project. However, there will be some requirements for tracking purposes that happen at post-award time. So again, if you have cost share in there, there may be questions later on. During the academic year, the fringe benefit rate is 42%. During summer months, it's 26%. If you anticipate that you'll have more months, months over multiple periods, summer and academic, I encourage you to use the calendar option. Your fringe benefits may be a little bit higher on the calculation side, but again, your project will only be charged actual cost. If you anticipate that it's going to be summer months, choose summer, right? Same thing with the rest of the folks on your project. The institutional based salary, otherwise known as IBS, is the value reflected in our accounting system. That's the one that's audited. So that's the number that goes in here. Whatever you get paid today and matches our auditable accounting system. Let's say that it's May and we anticipate raises from the legislature in July, right? Put your actual cost in here and then choose escalation in year one to account for the anticipated raise. So let's say that John gets $75,000 a year and Dr. Brown gets $85,000 a year. John is on a 12-month appointment. Dr. Brown is on an academic appointment. We need to make those distinctions because it changes the formulas. John's going to work 2 summer months in every year. And Dr. Brown is going to work 2 and then 1, whatever it turns out to be. You use the same process for all the other categories here. The exception being postdocs. North Carolina Central Policy says that postdoc compensation will be consistent with the NIH guidelines. So in this particular case, instead of manually entering a particular name, you will choose the postdoc level that applies to the person you're going to have on your grant. It will automatically populate the NIH salary for that particular position, and then you can put in the number of months that apply for whatever period. Graduate students and undergraduate students. You'll notice here that there's a pop-up that kind of gives you an idea of what value should go in there. The assumption is that students can only work 20 hours a week. Once they start working more than that, they're not students anymore, and there are some impacts on taxation and other things. So we put this little note in here to say, if a student's working 20 hours a week for 12 months at $15 an hour, the value you put in this particular category is $15,600. If you have questions, let me know. But again, you put in the value that you think they're going to earn using this methodology, and then put in the number of months. The formula will assume that they're working half-time. You don't have to modify the months to reflect that. So go ahead and just put in the number of months you anticipate they'll be working. Again, identify the appropriate period. In their case, it doesn't impact anything because they're not getting benefits, but it does help us with some other questions and reviews that we have. So please identify, are they working during the academic year, part of the summer, multiple periods, choose whatever applies. On the labor detail side, again, just want to caution you, there's certainly some sensitivity with salary information. We recognize as a state entity, some of this information is public, but there is a sensitivity to it. So just to encourage you to be careful with what you share and who has access to this information. This represents the cost based on the people, the salaries, and the months that you identified on the personnel tab. It does all the math for you. It applies the appropriate fringe benefit rate, depending on the individual, the period of time they're going to be working, and their particular labor category. You notice that it also provides estimated number of hours. That's just to kind of help you get a sense of how much time the number of months that you've identified translates to. Some sponsors may ask for hours. We caution you not to include hours in your proposal unless they're required, because it's not an auditable number. We don't track those numbers. Now, if I identify somebody as cost sharing, down here at the bottom, that's where they would show. So if I go back to the personnel tab and I identify my postdoc as cost shared because the dean's going to cover that cost, I would make the change here, and you'll notice that the postdoc note shows up under cost share. If I go back to the sponsor cost tab, you'll notice that those costs are now identified. They're not charged to the grant. They're identified as an actual cost needed to support the project that will be paid by another source. The rest of these tabs are relatively straightforward. You identify the particular gizmo that you're going to put in here. Equipment has to have a unit acquisition cost of $5,000 or more, a useful life of more than 1 year, and it has to perform its desired function as a standalone item. If it has to be plugged into something else in order to work, it may not necessarily meet that definition. So if this particular gizmo costs $15,000 and I need it in year 2, I would put that here and it would start to do the math for me. Something we've tried to do to help with a common question that we get in OSRP is build a travel tab for you. This tab is based on the state and North Carolina Central Travel Policy. So if you have questions about a particular item, we've got the link here so you can go and do some searching. The costs and the methodologies reflected in here also come from those policies. You'll see some additional verbiage taken from the policy. So if you have questions, we invite you to read the pop-up buttons, windows, or the policy itself. You can build your travel policy in 2 ways. Let's say that I'm going to Washington. And the purpose of my project is a sponsor meeting. I've got to meet with my sponsor. I put that here. It's out of state. That's going to impact the cost to the right. It's a domestic trip. Again, it impacts how I build my budget. I have to go every year. It's a required project trip by the sponsor. I expect it's going to be 3 days long, and myself and the co-PI have to go. Airfare is going to be about $350 each. All right. I'm not going to have any car rental because DC has a train and I like Uber. I'm not going to have any mileage because I'm going to try to take an Uber to the airport, but I may have some miscellaneous other costs. And I estimate that they'll be about $500. Right. You'll notice that it builds my travel budget for me, and that my travel budget will be consistent with the policies that apply. Let's do that same trip in a different way. Let's say that I'm not sure how many people are going or how much it's going to cost. Or how many people or how long or the airfare. But I think I need about $2,500 a year for a trip. I can do it another way. So again, you can use this as a tool to build your travel budget. We encourage you to be as specific as you can because we find that the sponsors are asking for more and more detail on the travel side. Materials similar to equipment, put in description. It's less than $5,000. It's $2,500 each. The basis of estimate tells me where this unit cost came from. So did the vendor give me a quote? Have I bought this before? Is this my best guess as a faculty PI? Right? And I need one in year 1. I need one in year 3. And I need one in year 4. Again, it does the math for you. I encourage you to put other comments in here that tell us more about what the cost, what the reason for it is, that's consistent with the budget narrative. Services or consulting. Again, these are types of things where you need a purchase order or a PSA, some sort of an agreement that is not a subcontract in order to purchase the services of an individual or a company of some kind. Right? Participant support costs. we want to draw your attention to what the policy says. There's been some confusion about what goes in here. We remind you that the only costs that go here are those costs that are in connection with conferences or training projects. Just because you have a particular individual on your grant and they're learning about a particular field of study does not constitute a training project. If that person is going to be traveling or get tuition reimbursement or some of those other things, we certainly put those in the categories. There'll be tabs for tuition, for example, and that tuition will match what's in the published policy of the university for a particular school. That's the kind of information you would put in there. But unless it's a connection with a conference or a training project, specifically, it does not go into participant support. Other direct costs, similar to materials, I'm going to identify, for example, publication costs, right? And it's going to cost me $1,500 a year. I've worked with this particular journal before. It's a historical cost, and I'm going to start publishing results in years 3, 4, 4, and 5. Again, it does the math for you. If you have a subcontract, again, it does all the math for us. Let's say that we're using the Blue Devils as a subcontractor. The default for new is yes on this particular field. The reason for that is there's an indirect cost implication. So if you have questions, let us know. The default should be yes. Let's say that we're going to start paying Duke in year 2. We're going to give them $100,000 a year, and their indirect cost rate is 30%. So I'm going to put $30,000. I'm going to break that out, and to whatever years it applies. The information that you put here should match the supported documentation that they provide us. Remember that the subcontractor should provide a letter of intent, scope of work, budget, and budget narrative. And if they have a federally negotiated indirect rate, copy of that as well. We need that information to review the cost information that you put in this particular field. So we've built our budget. Now that front tab has populated all those costs, right? And we identified my target of $500,000. And I'm a little bit less. So I'm right on target because I cost shared my postdoc. Again, this is just an introductory instruction on how to use it. If you have questions, we invite you to reach out to us. And if there's a category that you don't see, let us know. If you have questions about calculation, let us know. And we look forward to working with you. Thank you.